Hello everybody, and welcome to part 2 of my Star Wars Legends Chronological review series. Today we're going to cover issues number 0 and issues number 1 of the Dawn of the Jedi Force Storm comics, as well as the short story Eruption. The number 0 issue of Dawn of the Jedi Force Storm isn't really a story per se, but it's an introductory or informational piece that brings us up to speed with a lot of the things that will be shown in the upcoming Dawn of the Jedi Order. Namely, it introduces us to the Yor, a group of mysterious ships that show up on various planets and take people to the planet Tython in order to study the Force. The issue catalogs many of the elements of the Jedaii Order. Not the Jedi Order, the Jedaii Order. Very, very important distinction. The Jedaii are the predecessors to the Jedi. And this number 0 issue gives us a lot of background information on the Jedaii, including some of the people who make up their ranks and some of the temples that they study at, which cover different areas of study, which include science and martial arts. Most notably, this issue chronicles how exactly the Yor get everybody from their original planets to Tython and start the Jedaii Order. In the year 25,793 BBY, the Yor, which have been settled on 8 different planets for a long time, suddenly awaken and use the Force to telepathically summon members of 8 different species on their 8 different planets, including Wookiees, Twi'leks, and humans, as well as a race of monks known as the Dai Bendu. They are taken to the planet Tython in the deep core, where they are to study the light and dark sides of the Force. And the people who arrive on the planet come to be known as one people, the Tythons, and the ones who study the Force become known as the Jedaii, which is a Dai Bendu term for mystic center. Unfortunately, Tythons who are not Force sensitive and cannot study the Force are made to leave the planet because the dangers of the planet are simply it's too much for them. It's too dangerous, they can't stay there, and they end up going out to colonize all of the different planets of the Tython system. Some of these settlers end up growing to resent the Jedi and their powers, one of those people being the Despot Queen Shikakwa. The Despot Queen Shikakwa would end up uniting the criminal powers on her home planet and lead a despot war across the Tython system, pretty much to fight the Jedi, and to pretty much nobody's surprise, the Jedi won. It is then shown in the comic that all of this information that we just learned is being told through the words of a Jedi master who is teaching 2 young students. His lesson to the 2 young students is that everyone is like the Despot Queen in some ways because we all have darkness inside ourselves, but it is best to learn to control and recognize that darkness rather than avoid it or give into anger and hatred entirely. The comic then cuts to Tatooine of all places, which is shown to actually at this point in time be a lush jungle water planet instead of a desert planet. However, an alien race known as the Rakata are shown enslaving and conquering the people. One of the Rakata conquerors, named Tulkar, is shown ordering around his Force-sensitive servant guy named Zesh, who is referred to as a Force Hound. So pretty much Zesh is the servant of Tulkar, who is using his Force abilities for the Rakata conquests. Also, Tulkar can use Force Lightning. Cool. After his conquest of Tatooine, Tulkar is summoned by his leader, Skalnas, to the Rakata stronghold planet of Biss, where Skalnas tells Tulkar that he wants to use Zesh for his own needs. Skalnas' own Force Hound, Trill, says that she has been able to detect signs of a Force-sensitive planet hidden in the deep core, which we know is Tython. However, Trill is not powerful enough in the Force to find out exactly where it is, so he wants to use Zesh because he says he is more powerful. Zesh and Trill then get into a fight where they both reveal that they have lightsabers, which is pretty crazy to me because I didn't think that they had lightsabers at this early in the timeline, and the fight ends after the Rakata call it off. Zesh vows that he will be able to find the Force-rich planet, and the comic ends. Alright, now we're going to move on from this story and we're going to go to the short story Eruption. So we're going to put a pin in the story of Zesh and the Rakata for right now. I imagine we're going to get back to them pretty soon, but the short story Eruption focuses on a new set of characters. By the way, the short story Eruption can be found in the Legends paperback print of Dawn of the Jedi Into the Void, which I have right here. I'm not sure if older prints of the book have it in, but you can also find it in the book The Force Collection Volume 1. So, Eruption is the story of two Jedaii Rangers. Jedaii Rangers are pretty much Jedaii who go out and peacekeep and do the dirty work for the Order. So, they're kind of like just what all Jedi are back in the modern era, in the Republic era. One of them is named Hakrio, and he is a male Twi'lek, and the other one is named Lannery Brock, and she is a human female. They are going to a village next to an active volcano on the moon of Zarist, hoping to resolve a dispute between the Decian Mining Company and their workers. The mining company and the workers both believe that the best way to settle this dispute is to arrange a marriage between Oma, who is the daughter of the mining company's leader, and Brom Santis, who is the oldest son of the workers' leader. Unfortunately, Oma has been kidnapped by Baron Volnos Ryo, who is actually the brother of Jedaii Ranger Hakrio. Lannery Brock stays with the natives in order to keep the negotiations going peacefully, while Hakrio, using the volcanic eruption as cover, is able to locate and save Oma. Meanwhile, Lannery Brock is able to deduce that a servant of the Desane family is actually a spy for the Shikakwa crime lord, who, remember, was mentioned earlier in Dawn of the Jedi Force Storm number 1. When Hakrio returns with Oma, Oma says that she does not want to be a part of an arranged marriage, and the two Jedi warriors are afraid that this is going to restart the dispute between the workers and the mining company. Once the two factions start arguing again, Lannery Brock proposes the idea of fostering. Pretty much her idea is that Oma should go live with the workers for 6 months in order to see how they live, and Brom Santis would go live with the Desanes for 6 months in order to be a representative of his own people. With that settled, Lannery Brock is called back by the Jedi Council back to Tython because they have a special mission for her. Ooh. And Hakrio is sent to the planet Fury's Gate. Alright, so review time. What did I actually think of these comics and this short story? Well, so I actually liked learning about the origins of the Jedi, or the Jedaii, more than I thought I would, and I have a reason for saying that. See, usually when they try to explain some of the more mysterious or mystical or ancient parts of Star Wars, it ends up not really appealing to me. I feel like whenever they try to define or explore the origins of the Force, in particular, I feel like it takes away from the great mystery and the coolness factor of it. I imagine it's kind of like what people thought when the midichlorians were introduced in The Phantom Menace, because they made it less mysterious. For similar reasons, I'm probably also one of the few people on Earth who doesn't like the Mortis arc of the Clone Wars. I know. But it's because in the Mortis arc, when they introduce these beings who are so powerful in the Force and are like really ancient and are somehow separate from everything else, it makes it feel so contrived and so weird. I just feel like every time that they drift away from just what Obi-Wan defined the Force as A New Hope, it's an energy field that surrounds us, binds us, holds the galaxy together, it just loses some. When they try to explain it, it loses some of the magic, and it just ends up being, I don't know, kind of lame for me whenever they try to delve into the deepest mysteries too much. So I thought that I would feel similarly about the Jedi, that if they went too deep into who the Jedi are and what their origins are like, and, if we were given a very clear-cut explanation in how they came to be, I thought that them, in their process of trying to explain it, they would just not make it very cool, and it would lose some of the magic. On the opposite note, when I was first doing the research for making my timeline, and I found out about the Tho-Yor, I thought that the Tho-Yor were pretty stupid. I thought that these big, mysterious ships who came out of nowhere and summoned the Jedi just so that they could make the Jedi and make it happen. I just thought that it was totally contrived and it wasn't very interesting. Basically, I just thought that concept seemed pretty lame on paper. However, once I actually went in and read the comics and the stories, instead of just reading off the Wikipedia articles, I thought that the origins of the Jedi and how they did the Tho-Yor, it was actually pretty interesting. The Tho-Yor's origins still aren't really explained, but the way that they portray them as these long, dormant, structures almost like that then one day decide to wake up and summon these different beings from across the galaxy, all for their different strengths. Some are philosophers, some are warriors. I don't know. It still doesn't really make sense, but the way it's presented, it really made me okay with it, and it's actually pretty cool. I also wanted to point out that once the Jedi get to Tython, they are shown fighting dinosaurs, which is pretty cool. part 2 of my review, and we already have Jedi fighting 2 Baryonyxes. I think we're off to a great start. Another thing that I really wasn't sure coming into this era was the fact that the Jedaii, they study the light and the dark sides of the Force, as opposed to modern day Jedi who only focus on the light side of the Force. In fact, they actually go so far as to punish those who use one side or the other too much. They banish them to the moons of Ashla or Bogan if they delve too deep into the light or the dark side, respectively. So at first, when I learned this about the Jedi and I started reading the comics, I really didn't like that part because it showed... I feel like it was different than what George Lucas originally meant with his Jedi philosophy and who the Jedi are supposed to be, because the light side is selflessness and sacrifice and doing the right thing, and the dark side is selfishness and anger and hatred, and the dark side in the movies is shown to always lead to ruin, even if you let it dominate you for a little bit. To George Lucas, balance in the Force meant having only Jedi, meant only having people who protected others. Meanwhile, the Jedi philosophy seems to be more of a literal balance, like a scale between light and dark side that you have to keep within yourself. I don't know, it just really seemed to fly in the face of what George Lucas originally meant when he meant balance in the Force. However, then we get to a part in the short story Eruption, where in the story, Hawk Rio, the Jedaii Ranger, has to kill a couple of guards in order to progress, in order to find Oma and complete his mission. And in doing so, you see him describe how he is tapping into the dark side of the Force, how he has to tap into that in order to kill people. And when he does so, he says that this darkness inside him, it grows satiated, it makes it happy, but he can still feel it strong inside him, and so he kind of has to dial it back to maintain that balance. And it's just a really interesting part of the book that describes his emotional state as he kills these guards. It's an efficient, quick kill, and then he has to sort of dial back the part of him that is satisfied with that violence. He talks about how seductive and tempting it is to stay on the side of the dark instead of moving himself into the middle again. He even mentions that at one point earlier in his life, he delved too deep into the dark side, and he was banished by the Jedaii Order to the moon of Bogan to reflect on himself until he was allowed to resume his Jedi duties. And I think this look into Hawk's mind shows us where the Jedi philosophy will ultimately fail. This half-dark, half-light philosophy will eventually blow up in their faces, and we will eventually get to the strictly light side philosophy of the Jedi of more modern times. I imagine that we will eventually get to see the exact point in time that the Jedi end up coming to some sort of crisis or conflict and redesign and rebrand their order in order to have a more light side philosophy and become the Jedi. I think this might actually be where the origins of the Sith are, because if I remember correctly, aren't the Sith just Jedi or Jedaii who went too much into the dark side and didn't want to have to restrain themselves, and they were like, we don't want to do this anymore, we just want to do the dark side. And then the Jedi are like, oh shit, these people are causing problems, maybe we shouldn't use the dark side anymore, maybe the light side's the only one that's doing us any good. Because I don't know too much, but I know eventually the Jedi and the Sith start fighting once the Sith show up. So yeah, that's just a little bit of prediction on what I think is going on. I don't know if any of that's actually true. Hey everybody, this is me from the future. This is editing me. There were a couple of connections that I remembered while editing that I didn't write down in my notes, but I still wanted to point out. So in the comics, the Rakata, they go to the planet Biss, which is the planet that Palpatine uses to house his clone bodies in the Dark Empire comics. I know I said I didn't know much about the EU, but I did know about Dark Empire, and I recognized the name of the planet Biss, and I just wanted to say something about that. And also the Dai Bendu monks that are shown at the beginning of the comic of issue 1. The name Dai Bendu comes from the Jedi Bendu, which is what George Lucas originally called the Jedi Order in his earlier scripts for A New Hope. So yeah, anyway guys, those are pretty much my thoughts on the first 2 comic issues in that little short story. I can't wait to continue the stories of Zesh and the Rakata and Hawk Rio and Lannery Brock later down the line in the upcoming novel and the comics. So as for ratings, I think I'll give Dawn of the Jedi Force Storm issue 0, 3.5 4 out of 5. I'll give issue 1 4 Thor Yours out of 5, and I will also give Eruption 4 Thor Yours out of 5. They were all pretty interesting, pretty engaging reads. Nothing too crazy yet, but I did enjoy the things I learned. And man, it is hard to say Thor Yours like 3 times in a row. Yeah, they were all entertaining, they were all informative, but I'm really anxious to get to some of the more uninterrupted long-form stories down the road. So, as you may have guessed, we are not going to pick up Force Storm number 2 until after the novel Dawn of the Jedi Into the Void. And that is making me ask a question about how exactly we should do things like comics where a storyline might be cut and then we move on to a book or a different comic and then we continue the storyline later just because we know that the timeline flows that way. I do still want everything to be in a pretty tight order for how they happened chronologically, but if we end up getting to things that are pretty close together anyway, I don't just want to end up stopping and starting and stopping and starting and stopping and starting a bunch of storylines one after the other just so that we can see everything for the sake of seeing it in an exact order. And I might edit how I do things a little bit, because I ultimately do want this to be a satisfying experience, not just for you guys, but for me. But for right now, I'm not going to pick up Dawn of the Jedi Force Storm issue number 2 until we are done with the book. Hopefully this isn't too jarring or, disorientating for some of you or me, because I'm pretty sure, like from what I've seen, we aren't going to see Zesh or maybe the Rakata until after this book and after a few more comics. But I think we needed to see Dawn of the Jedi Force Storm 0 and 1 in order to get those important context clues of who the Jedaii are and how they started. I imagine that we could read Dawn of the Jedi Into the Void without knowing any of that, but I still think that it was helpful to understand those things from a timeline perspective, even if we might not pick up immediately on the story of Zesh and the Rakata and all those other people until a little bit later. Alright guys, I think that does it for part 2. Part 3 might take me a little while longer because I need to read an entire book instead of just a short story or a short story and a couple of comics. It's really not that long of a book, it's only 300 pages, but I still need to get through another book that I've been putting off for a while, and I might try and tinker around with making some other videos which don't have to do with Star Wars, but I will make sure that part 3 is out before too long, hopefully in a couple of weeks. Alright, well, I will see you guys in the next one. May the Force be with you, always.